You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host, author, and occasional misanthrope, Juliette Miranda. Go to theunwritablerant.com and you can subscribe on iTunes or connect with the show on Facebook and Twitter.
Hey y'all, it's Juliette Miranda. Welcome to episode 96 of the Unwritable Rant podcast. My glass is full of bourbon and I am dying to have a sip. So join me, won't you? Fill up a glass, raise it up, and let's say cheers. Oh, bourbon. So today I'm drinking a bourbon that I have discussed before, but it's become something of a tradition for my guy and I. Today, I'm drinking Town Branch Bourbon Whiskey. Every year, once summer kicks in, my guy and I pick up a bottle of this to toast to the season. It's what I moved on to first after I'd gotten tired of Maker's Mark and Jim Beam and wanted to try something that was a little bit more interesting, but not out of my comfort zone. So for all y'all experienced bourbon drinkers, this is not going to blow your socks off. However, it is an incredibly drinkable bourbon, and it's really delightful for the summertime. Take that first sip, and I swear it tastes a little bit like pear. It almost has a white wine sort of quality to it. It's sweet, a little fruity, and then it smooths out into something with a little bit of pepper on the end. Really, I can think of very few better ways to celebrate the full-on summer season than with a glass of Town Branch bourbon. So my guy and I are just getting back from one road trip, and we are about to hit the road for another. And all this travel has gotten me thinking a little bit about baggage. Not the emotional kind, although we certainly have plenty of that, but the furniture kind. The kind that follows you around from home to home and just winds up stashed like a dirty little secret in a back room. And not too long ago, I walked into our back room and saw one of our dirty little secrets. Now, we certainly had more of these secrets in our early days. Mostly it was that framed sort of ugly poster art of cliched Van Gogh and Matisse pieces. I'd been dragging this crap around with me since my 20s. And the second my guy and I moved in together, he disposed of them swiftly and without discussion. Somehow, though, two pieces of his furniture have survived all of our purges and redecorations. One is a hideous glass coffee table, and the other is a giant tube television set. Both have been hidden in our spare bedroom for the past 8 years or so, a tacky monument to all that was wrong with the 90s. Now, don't get the wrong idea. My guy wasn't clinging to these useless disasters out of some sense of nostalgia. He disliked them just as much as I did. But both pieces were large and clunky and weirdly fragile, which means that the only thing tethering them to our back bedroom was our own laziness. Or at least it was, until I caught sight of new bedroom furniture that I knew we needed. I'll tell you, nothing motivates me more than shiny new things. And that meant the time had come to kick our dirty little secret baggage out to the curb. Of course, that's easier said than done, because if you know what a tube TV is, then you know just how dramatically undesirable they are. I did not know this when I started my junk purge. And since the TV was fully functional, I signed us up to participate in the neighborhood garage sale. I can't really say I'm a fan of garage sales, of holding or attending one, but it was either that or Craigslist. And I figured a garage sale was the least likely of the two to result in my being kidnapped and chained to a furnace. Oddly, my guy was shockingly quiet through all of the garage sale prep. I suspect he was harboring hopes that we would finally be rid of these eyesores. But deep down, he was just far more realistic in the likelihood that that was not going to happen and didn't want to break my spirit. Still, when garage sale day rolled around, he helped me wrangle that TV set, the glass coffee table, and several boxes worth of junk down one flight of stairs and into the driveway for 5 hours of scrutiny from strangers. I am convinced that there are two types of people who seek out garage sales. The ones looking for a bargain or buried treasure, and the ones looking to judge you by your junk. They walk in all self-righteous and condescending and paw through things with very delicate fingertips. You can see them rolling their eyes when they find something that annoys them. Like my Sex and the City DVD collection, it earned a very hearty snicker from one obnoxious matron. And my collection of margarita glasses, that got me an AA calling card instead of a sale. But then, of course, there was that hulking monstrosity of a tube television set. I'd kept it perched on the stupid glass coffee table and positioned it directly in the center of the driveway where no one could miss them. My hope was that some John Waters wannabe would appreciate their tacky splendor and want to snag them as a set. Sadly, people actually went out of their way to walk around the display, as if the old tube set was emitting nuclear waste instead of just being filled with about 6 pounds of lead and maybe a little bit of mercury. And get this. One little girl stopped and stared at that television as if it was on display in a museum. She looks up at her mother and she's all, "What is that?" And the mother replies, That's just junk." This coming from the same woman who paid my neighbor $5 for a one-eared Mickey Mouse hat. Yeah, she knows what junk is. Needless to say, by the end of the day, the TV and the stand remained. I was disheartened, but not ready to give up. I figured if nobody wanted to buy them, perhaps they'd want to take them. I made my guy drag it all out to the curb for what I like to call the magic elves to cart away. You see, our neighborhood has, well, let's just call them alternative garbage men. We never see them and have no idea where they come from or where they go, but they make all of our random stuff disappear. Old love seats, vacuum cleaners, desk chairs with missing wheels, they all vanish after dark when left on the curb. So at dawn the next day, I sprint to the window. And what do you know, the magic elves had indeed paid us a visit. Apparently the gleam of the chrome and glass coffee table had caught their eyes, so much so that they had delicately lifted the TV set off of it and placed it back on the sidewalk so they could collect the table without any extra baggage attached. Well, that was a bummer. 3 hours later, I learned that not only did the magic elves not want our tube TV, neither did Goodwill, the Salvation Army, or our local dump, who felt obligated to tell me that it was illegal to dispose of a tube TV. That meant my guy and I had to drag the damn thing back up the driveway and into our garage. At this point, setting that TV set on fire seemed our only way of getting rid of it. And believe me, I was not above it. I had managed to get the damn thing out of the house. I wasn't about to let it rot in the garage for another 8 years just because it wasn't in fashion anymore and science deemed it a hazard. So I mulled the problem over the best way I know how. Over copious amounts of booze. It took an entire day of drunken brainstorming with my guy, but by 10 p.m., we had a solution. And around 1 a.m., we put our plan into action. Now, when I commit to something, I go all out. I knew that discretion was the key in having a successful disposal of this stupid television. So I ran up into the house and do a quick change around and emerge ready for some late-night misdemeanor crime. My guy, who had remained on the driveway to finish off the bottle of bourbon, he says, "You look like you're going to rob a bank." And I suppose he did have a point. I had changed into a pair of black jeans and a dark sweatshirt and tucked my hair up into a baseball cap. Maybe I had gone a little bit overboard, but by comparison, my guy looked as though he was about to head to the beach. I mean, he was wearing shorts, a t-shirt, and flip-flops. I look at him and I say, "Are you seriously going to commit breaking and entering in flip-flops?" Apparently, real men can commit a crime in whatever they please. Fine. There is no arguing with that kind of drunken logic. So we each grab an end of that behemoth of a TV set, make our way down the driveway, onto the grass, and start walking behind the house. Because our destination? Well, that was the maintenance shed, which was rarely locked and contained a very large dumpster. Now, this dumpster was most definitely not for resident use, as we had been told time and time again by our management office. But we figured, hey, it's dark. No one is going to notice a TV set being added to the collection of debris in there. Now, like I said, we live in something of a sleepy townhome community, where most folks are in bed by 11. So at 1:30 in the morning, the whole place was silent, with the rather ridiculous exception of my guy's flip-flops. Each step he takes, you can hear the foam sole slapping against his heels. Slap, slap, slap. And there we are, gingerly carting that stupid TV set across the complex. Me doing my best to be inconspicuous, and my guy leaving a trail of audible breadcrumbs behind us. Remind me never to knock over a liquor store with you, I hiss at him. And his only response is more slapping. We finally reach the dumpster shed, which thankfully was unlocked. And I'm thinking, we did it, this is awesome. And just as we're about to hoist the set into the dumpster, someone shines a flashlight beam right into our faces. We are caught like a couple of raccoons there at the dumpster, and we're both so stunned that we just freeze right there in the flashlight. Now I'm tempted to drop the TV and make a break for it. But this wasn't an episode of I Love Lucy. Instead, we do what any rational booze-drinking adult couple would do. We continue hoisting that TV set right over the side of the dumpster and drop it in. Noise be damned. Flashlight guy, who turns out to be the maintenance manager, is definitely not amused. He escorts us over to the leasing office, my guy flip-flopping the whole way there. And it's there that he tells us how he caught us. He was just getting situated in bed with his windows open, and what do you know? He heard my guy's flip-flops from his open bedroom window and came out to investigate. And look what he found. A couple of drunken residents using the dumpster for improper purposes. Well, he's working himself up into a lather and threatening to call the cops. And I'll tell y'all, for a moment, it really did seem like he would. But nothing sobers up a drunk like the prospect of jail time. And my guy was able to give the manager his best choir boy expression and told him our tale of television woe. I don't know if the manager took pity on us or not, but I can say that in the end, since we hadn't actually broken into anything and hadn't done any real damage to property, the management office just wound up issuing us a very hefty fine. And as my guy begrudgingly wrote out a check to cover it, I just looked at him and shook my head. I told him not to wear those damn flip-flops. And with that, I'm raising up my bourbon and thanking our lucky stars that TV is now out of our lives. Cheers, y'all. Oh, this bourbon is just so easy to drink, y'all. Seriously, this is like nighttime, hanging out on the driveway, watching the stars come out kind of bourbon. So good. So as I said earlier, my guy and I are about to hit the road again for another one of our fantastic road trips. This time, we're heading up to Michigan to celebrate the 4th of July with friends who have a cabin there. And we are sure to get into plenty of mischief. But I'll tell you, no one in my life has ever been more adept at causing mischief and mayhem on the 4th of July than my dad. Not that he has ever really needed an excuse to blow things up, but the 4th of July has always been my dad's favorite holiday. Even that one year when everything just went wrong. Now, to appreciate this story, it does require that I provide a little bit of background about my dad. For starters, you should know that everyone in my family has their own personal issues with wildlife. Obviously, for me, that would be frogs and geese. But for my dad, it's squirrels. I'm not much of a fan of squirrels either, but for my dad, it's personal. And after years and years of long-winded yarns, I've been able to pinpoint exactly when my dad unwittingly waged war against the squirrels and why they've had it in for him ever since. It all started on my 12th birthday. It was a particularly snowy February morning, and after a wild slumber party that I'd had to celebrate, my dad was out in the driveway with his snowblower. He was doing his best to make sure that the girls could be picked up as quickly and efficiently as possible. He always liked to have the absolute best, top-of-the-line gear to play with, and this snowblower was industrial quality. And of course, this being the 80s, it was likely lacking all of the usual security features that you see on large-scale equipment. So my friends and I are all gathered in the living room. We're reading Teen Beat magazine and stuffing our faces full of donuts when we catch sight of something in the driveway. It was my dad, in a rather grisly foreshadowing of the movie Fargo. Somehow, and he swears not deliberately, my dad managed to suck a squirrel into his snowblower and had just sent bloody bits of squirrel meat hurling across the freshly fallen snow. Few things stand out more against crisp white snow than bloody entrails, and this was quite the display. All my little friends start squealing in disgust, but me, I ran out and started poking at the remains with a stick. As for my dad, well, he had unknowingly unleashed a lifetime of squirrel fury. It started in the spring, when the walnut tree next to our house had started to bloom, or whatever it is that nut trees do. My dad would walk out into the driveway to collect the newspaper or the trash, and would have to dodge a literal hailstorm of walnuts being hurled from the dark corners of the garage roof. It was the damnedest thing. And I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't seen it for myself, but any one of us could walk out into the driveway without incident, except my dad. So he decides he's got to get to the bottom of things, and one day grabs his trusty ladder to investigate. Up there on the roof, he found that the squirrels had built not just a nest, but a rather large arsenal of walnuts. And they were all clearly intended for my dad. Year after year, he would risk lumps and concussion to grab the mail. It got especially bad in the autumn. And every so often, we'd find my dad standing in the driveway, launching M80 firecrackers into the tree to try and roust the squirrels out. Nothing he did mattered. He could chop that whole damn tree down, and somehow the squirrels found him. So fast forward a couple of years to the summer. I was 18 then and about to head off to college in the fall. Although none of us said it, we all had the impression that this was going to be the last summer that we would spend together as a family. So that made our 4th of July festivities all the more important to us. It was a tradition that every holiday we would pack up our stuff and head out to a cabin that my grandfather owned off a lake somewhere in the depths of Illinois. My entire family would gather there. Not just my immediate family, but all of my extended cousins and aunts and uncles and even random friends of the family. Because they all knew that the cabin was the best place to see the best fireworks in all of Illinois. I have mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. My dad was licensed to purchase, carry, and detonate high-explosive devices. At one time, he used to consult for several entertainment companies who would do pyrotechnic displays for athletic stadiums around the country. So he maintained his licenses, and of course, he used them to be able to put on his own firework displays for the family on 4th of July. He never told us how or where he purchased his materials for these elaborate displays, which today kind of seems like plausible deniability, but back then just added to the mystery and wonder of this holiday. I'll tell y'all, one of my favorite things to do when packing up the family truck was help my dad affix all of the class explosive stickers to the window that allowed him to transport his top-secret fireworks. Of course, they were kept right alongside a keg of beer and all of our beach gear. And then we'd be on the road and would gather at the cabin for endless summer days of swimming and volleyball and fishing, while my dad would spend his time out at a clearing on the side of the lake where he would assemble all of his pyrotechnics. We were free to join him during the day. He had built several small stands that allowed us to safely launch little fireworks like bottle rockets and buzz bombs, but at night, that clearing was off limits. Y'all, my dad is something of a master showman. Just after dark, he would disappear into the house and get himself all geared up for the occasion in his camouflage jumpsuit and crash helmet. We'd all be gathered on the front lawn in our blankets, us kids with concealed wine coolers and beers that we had snuck from the kitchen, and coated in a thick misting of DEET, while our parents would be on the porch in rocking chairs. My dad would step out to thunderous applause from all of the family and would wave to us and light his ceremonial flare. We'd watch that red light as it moved down the gravel path past the evergreen trees and toward the clearing. It was firework time, and we were excited beyond belief. My dad always started his display with a series of aerial bombs, usually 4, each in increasing intensity, with the 4th one so powerful it could shake ticks right out of the trees. The ground would quake below us, and we would all settle in to watch the sky illuminate in vibrant bouquets of color. And that night was especially spectacular. My dad had gone all out to build the best, most impressive display he could think of. There are rockets and bombs and fireworks just launching into the air and exploding and delivering all these amazing colors and sights. It was incredible. And it all went great for about 10 minutes or so. Now, what happened next has been subject to decades of interpretation and quizzing. All I know is what my dad has told me. Whether or not it is true is well contained within him, the trees, and of course, the squirrels. To hear my dad tell it, he was ambushed by a gang of rogue squirrels hell-bent on tearing his ankles open. There were 3 of them, he says, a perfectly choreographed team. One of them lunged at him from a tree. Another circled his ankles and caused him to trip. And the third reared up on his little hind legs and bared a set of seriously pointy teeth, gnawing through, what else but a walnut. My dad lost his balance and landed on the ground with a massive thud, and in the process knocked several of his mortars out of place. Mortars that just happened to contain lit explosives. The squirrels were apparently chattering at my dad madly, threatening him with their little vicious paws and celebrating their gigantic win. But my dad's main concern was getting the fuck away from those shells before they launched. He drags himself to safety just as the discharge is ignited and the shells go up. Or more accurately, they went out. In my dad's fall, he had managed to kick the mortar so that they pointed directly toward a small island in the middle of the lake, which is exactly where those shells landed, exploded, and promptly set the brush on fire. Wouldn't you know it? It had been an especially dry summer. So it wasn't long before that entire island was ablaze. Birds are fleeing for safety. Trees are just going up in flames like they're made out of cardboard. Several of my less smart relatives loaded themselves into rowboats with buckets to attempt to bail the fire out. My dad, meanwhile, had grabbed his shotgun and was blasting holes in trees looking for the errant rodents that had ruined his fireworks display. And that is exactly how the police found him when they pulled up. Apparently, one of our neighbors across the lake had called to report the fire and apparent gunshots. There wasn't a whole lot that the fire department could or wanted to do for an uninhabited island fire, but the police sure had plenty to say to my dad. He immediately complied with their request to drop the weapon. And after they took the handcuffs off, he was able to produce a FOID card, gun permit, and all of the necessary paperwork to prove that he was indeed licensed and legal. He hadn't even been drinking. So after it was revealed that my grandfather also owned that island out in the lake, there wasn't a whole lot the police could do. Still, they deemed my dad a menace, confiscated his remaining fireworks, and left us there on the lakeshore, more than a little confused about what had just happened, and definitely disappointed that our fireworks display had been cut short. But my dad's enthusiasm for the holiday was unwavering. He wasn't going to let those rotten squirrels ruin his good time. So he cracked open his first beer of the evening, waved his hands in the air to get our attention, and said, "Folks, the show is just beginning." And with that, we all gathered on the lawn and watched that island in the lake burn. It took several hours, and it wasn't the most elaborate 4th of July celebration we've ever had, but it is perhaps the most fitting. As I had suspected, that was our last 4th of July spent together as a family. But I'll tell y'all, to this day, it is the one 4th of July I will always remember. And with that, I am going to raise up my glass once again and toast to my dad, the mad scientist, part-time pyromaniac, and full-time squirrel nemesis. Cheers, y'all. Oh, all right. It is time for me to pack my bags. There is a road waiting, and my guy and I are gonna hit it. So I hope you all have a great and safe 4th of July. I'll be back to chat with y'all again next week. Cheers.
Go to theunwritablерant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. You can hear new episodes of The Unwritable Rant on radiovegas.rocks every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern and on IPMNation.com on Saturdays and Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern, and hear best of episodes every weekday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter at Morning Neurosis.
Girl, you was pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, a couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton lady. Hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweetest taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You can be the flower on my magnolia. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this.